Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are really getting into the weeds on a fundamental question. What exactly is animal instinct?
Right. It sounds simple, doesn't it?
It does. For ages, the view was pretty clear-cut. Instincts were these, fixed things, inherited unlearned behaviors, fixed action patterns, or FAPs, as the early guys called them.
Yeah, the classic ethologists. Think basic drives, finding food, mating, that sort of thing, like a specific courtship dance that never ever changes.
Exactly. Purely hardwired. Programmed by DNA, end of story.
But like a lot of things in biology, that simple picture, well, it started to fall apart. Modern research just blew the doors off that idea.
Okay, so what's the mission for us today, then? Where are we headed with this?
The core mission, really, is to see just how far we've moved beyond that simple definition. Because the nature versus nurture debate, it's not just active, it's shown us the distinction is kind of artificial.
Ah, so it's not either.
Not at all. Modern work genetics, neurobiology, animal behavior studies, it all points to this intricate balance. Instinct is shaped by genes, sure, but also massively by the environment, by individual learning, by experience.
So we're ditching the idea of just inherited software.
Pretty much. We need to look at the actual mechanisms animals use. We'll start small with like the internal magnetic GPS some animals have,
Okay.
and then we'll scale up. Look at how groups navigate together, creating this amazing collective intelligence, something no single animal could manage on its own.
Got it. So let's rewind a bit first. Back to the pioneers, Lorenz, Tinbergen, von Frisch. They were big on those FAPs, right?
Absolutely. They did foundational work. Lorenz, for instance, famously studied duck courtship.
The tail shaking and head flicking.
Exactly. He showed these incredibly detailed stereotype sequences were shared within a species. Seemed like solid proof of fixed inherited patterns.
But you're saying that fixed idea didn't hold up.
It proved too rigid, yeah. The core idea now is more about flexibility. Maybe the basic drive, the framework for the behavior is inherited, but the execution,
Yeah.
highly adaptable.
Okay, so not fixed action patterns,
Yeah.
but modifiable action patterns.
Precisely. MAPs, think about nest building.
Right. A bird knows how to build his species type of nest.
That's the inherited framework, the instinct. But what it builds with, that depends entirely on what's around. Twigs, grass, mud, bits of plastic.
Whatever's available locally. So the fixed pattern gets modified by learning and the environment.
Exactly. That flexibility is key.
Okay, that makes sense for immediate adaptation. But what about the long game, over generations? You mentioned the line between innate and learned blurring even more, maybe even into the genetics.
Ah, yes. This is where it gets really fascinating and maybe a bit controversial. Epigenetics.
Right, there was that argument back in 2017.
Yeah, suggesting that some learned responses, things like how an animal reacts to long-term stress or maybe even certain psychological traits, could eventually influence the inherited traits across generations.
Whoa, hang on. Learned traits becoming inherited. That sounds a bit like Lamarckism, doesn't it? Giraffes stretching their necks.
It sounds like it, but the mechanism is different. That's the key point. Classic Lamarckism was about, traits acquired in one lifetime being directly passed on. Epigenetics isn't changing the DNA sequence itself.
Okay, so what is it changing?
It's changing gene expression. Think
Yeah.
of it like chemical tags. Methylation is a common one that attach to the DNA and act like dimmer switches. They turn genes up or down.
And these dimmer switches can be influenced by the environment.
Yes, things like stress, diet, toxins, they can change these epigenetic tags. And crucially, sometimes these tags can be passed down to the next generation.
So the offspring inherit not just the genes, but some of the settings for those genes based on the parent's experience.
That's the idea. It allows a species to kind of remember a beneficial response to a persistent environmental challenge, potentially improving survival. It's like a form of inherited learning, but operating on top of the DNA sequence.
Wow, okay. So the environment doesn't just trigger instinct, it can subtly shape future inherited responses.
Precisely. And the complexity led some researchers, like Mark Blumberg back in 2016, to argue that maybe the word instinct itself is the problem. It's too much of a catch-all.
What did he suggest instead?
He proposed that many behaviors we call instinctive actually develop through what he called species-typical experiences.
Meaning?
Meaning the animal has the innate potential, the wiring for a behavior, but it needs the right kind of experience, the normal experiences for its species as it grows up, to actually develop and refine that behavior.
Ah, like learning to walk, maybe.
Yeah.
The potential is there, but you need practice.
Exactly. Or think of a seagull chick pecking at its parent's beak for food. It starts off clumsy, inaccurate. But through repetition, trial and error, species typical experience, it gets better and better. The basic drive is there, but the skill develops.
Okay, I think I'm getting a handle on this shift from fixed commands
Mhm.
to flexible, experience-shaped behaviors. But none of that matters if you can't find your way around, right?
Absolutely. Which brings us to navigation,
Hmm.
especially long distance navigation. How do they do it?
Crossing thousands of miles of seemingly empty space.
It's one of evolution's masterpieces. And a key mechanism is magnetoreception.
The internal magnetic sense,
Mhm.
the biological GPS.
You got it.
And sea turtles are the poster child for this, aren't they?
They really are a fantastic example. It starts simple for the hatchlings.
Just get away from the shore.
Right. Use the direction of the waves, swim offshore, basic stuff. But once they're out in the deep ocean,
Yeah.
that's when the magnetic sense kicks in.
And it's not just for direction, like a compass.
It's both a compass and a map. That's the incredible part. The Earth's magnetic field isn't uniform. It varies in intensity and inclination angle depending on where you are.
Ah, so different locations have unique magnetic signatures, like coordinates.
Exactly. A magnetic address. Hatchlings seem to be born programmed to recognize certain addresses. For loggerheads born in Florida, for example, this helps them recognize and avoid the dangerously cold waters further north.
So it keeps them in the safe zone initially.
Yes. And then years later, when they're adults ready to breed, they use that same magnetic map sense to navigate back.
To the very beach where they hatched.
Often, yes. They appear to imprint on the specific magnetic address of their natal beach as hatchlings, and they use that information to return sometimes decades later. It's phenomenal.
It really is. But how? How does a turtle or a bird physically detect a magnetic field? Is it tiny magnets in their heads or
Well, that's still debated. There are two main hypotheses duking it out. The first one is kind of intuitive. The iron-based compass.
tiny magnets?
Essentially, yeah. The idea is that particles of magnetite, which is an iron oxide, exist somewhere in the animal's body, maybe the beak in birds, possibly connected to the trigeminal nerve. These particles physically align with the magnetic field, like microscopic compass needles.
Okay, that makes mechanical sense. What's the alternative?
The alternative is weirder and maybe more elegant. It's called the quantum compass.
Quantum. We're talking quantum physics and biology.
We are. This theory centers on a protein called cryptochrome, found in the retinas of migratory birds like the European robin, specifically Cry4a.
And how does a protein detect magnetism?
Through a quantum effect called the radical pair mechanism. Basically, light hitting the cryptochrome creates a pair of molecules with electrons whose spins are linked or entangled. The Earth's magnetic field can subtly influence how long these electrons stay in their specific spin states.
Okay, my brain hurts a little.
Yeah, it's complex. But the upshot is, this quantum process is thought to somehow affect the bird's visual perception, maybe creating a sort of visual overlay that indicates the magnetic field lines. And it's incredibly sensitive.
More sensitive than tiny iron filings would be.
Potentially, yes. And there's evidence. Experiments have shown that exposing robins to very weak, oscillating radio frequency fields compass completely messes up their orientation.
Ah, because those weak fields interfere with the delicate quantum spin states.
That's the interpretation. It strongly suggests that, at least for these robins, it's the quantum mechanism at play,
Incredible. Nature using quantum mechanics for navigation.
isn't it? And just to round out the individual picture, we should mention sharks and rays.
They have a different system again.
They're totally different. They use electromagnetic induction. They have these special electroreceptor organs, the ampullae of Lorenzini.
Ah, yes, the little pores on their snouts.
Right. As they swim through the Earth's magnetic field, it induces tiny electrical currents in the surrounding seawater, which they can detect with these incredibly sensitive pores. So, different physics, same outcome.
Yeah.
Navigating using the planet's magnetic field.
Okay. So individual animals are equipped with some seriously sophisticated navigation gear. But lots of animals travel in groups. Flocks, herds, schools.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next level. Collective navigation. Moving together isn't just about safety from predators. It often dramatically improves how they navigate.
So the group is smarter than the individual.
In many cases, yes, that's a key benefit of sociality.
Okay, how does that work? If you have 1,000 birds, and maybe only half know the right way, how do they not just fly off in all directions?
Well, that touches on the first big mechanism, the many wrongs principle.
Many wrongs. Making a right?
Kind of. It's basically the law of large numbers. Imagine each bird has a slightly noisy estimate of the correct direction. Some are off a bit to the left, some a bit to the right.
Okay. Random errors.
Right. But when you average all those slightly wrong individual estimates across the whole group, the random errors tend to cancel each other out. The collective average ends up being much closer to the true direction than most individuals were on their own.
So statistical averaging cleans up the noise.
Precisely. We see this with homing pigeons. Flocks fly significantly straighter routes than pigeons flying solo, or mosquito fish larger groups make faster, more accurate choices about which way to go. The group filters out individual mistakes.
Okay, that makes sense for refining direction. But what about finding things, like resources? Can the group sense things an individual can't?
Yes, absolutely. That's the second mechanism, emergent sensing.
Emergent sensing.
The group acts like a big distributed sensor network. It can detect subtle environmental gradients, changes in temperature, scent, light that might be too faint for any single animal to pick up reliably.
Can you give an example?
White storks finding thermals. Those rising columns of warm air are crucial for soaring birds to save energy during migration, but they can be tricky to locate.
Right, invisible columns of air.
Exactly. But a flock of storks spread out over an area is much better at detecting the subtle cues indicating a thermal nearby than a lone bird would be. Someone in the group finds it, others see them start to circle and rise, and soon the whole flock converges on it.
So the group collectively maps out these invisible resources, like the golden shiners and light gradients you mentioned.
Yeah, similar idea. They collectively sense and move up a light gradient by adjusting their swim speed based on neighbors, something one fish alone might struggle with.
Okay, averaging errors, sensing gradients. What if some individuals genuinely know better, like older experienced animals,
Ah, that leads us straight to leadership. The third mechanism.
where a few experts guide the masses?
Exactly. A minority of informed individuals guides the naive majority. And what's fascinating from modeling studies is how few leaders you actually need.
Really? Not like 50-50.
No, often far fewer. There seems to be a sharp threshold below a certain percentage of informed individuals. The group wanders aimlessly, but cross that threshold, even with a relatively small number of leaders, and the group suddenly becomes highly directed and accurate.
Wow. So a little knowledge goes a long way in a crowd.
It seems so. We see this in the wild, too. With whooping cranes, for instance, the older, more experienced birds clearly lead the migration, and their presence significantly boosts the navigational accuracy of the younger birds following them.
Okay, so the young cranes are following the leaders. Is that just temporary guidance, or are they actually learning the route?
That brings us to the fourth mechanism, social learning, which is distinct from just following a leader on one trip. Social learning implies a more lasting transfer of knowledge. Naive individuals learn routes or behaviors by following or observing experienced group members, and then they retain that knowledge.
So the knowledge gets passed on.
Right. It's unidirectional from experience to naive. We see incredible examples like juvenile migrating birds, say short-toed eagles or white storks, that will actually follow experienced adults, even if it means deviating from their own innate, genetically programmed migratory direction.
They override their instinct based on what the others are doing.
Yes, if following the group seems to lead to a better outcome, like finding better resources or a safer route, the French grunts example is amazing too.
Ah, the fish that were moved.
Yeah. Researchers moved some grunts to a new location with an established population. The newcomers learned the local migration routes to feeding sites by following the residents. And here's the kicker. Even after the original resident fish were removed, the newcomers kept using those learned routes.
The knowledge stuck. It was transmitted culturally.
Exactly, it became part of their behavioral tradition.
Which leads perfectly into the long-term consequences, right? This idea of migratory culture.
Precisely. When navigational knowledge isn't just learned socially, but persists over generations, gets refined, and shapes the group's behavior long term, we're talking about culture.
So we need to distinguish between just passing on infosocial learning and something more dynamic.
Yes. Social learning is about transmission passing on existing knowledge, like a parent teaching a child. But then there's collective learning.
Okay, what's the difference?
Collective learning is where new, potentially better knowledge emerges from the social interactions themselves. The group didn't just learn from experts. The dynamics of the group interaction can actually generate novel solutions or improvements.
How does that work?
It often involves that many wrongs idea again, but maybe with a twist. Individual variations or errors aren't just noise to be averaged out. Sometimes someone's mistake might accidentally uncover a shortcut or a better path. If the group is flexible enough to recognize and adopt that new, better way.
Then the group has collectively discovered something new, an innovation.
Exactly. And when these beneficial modifications are retained and built upon over time, generation after generation, that's cumulative culture. It's often called the ratchet effect.
The
Right.
ratchet effect, like a wrench that only turns one way, allowing progress to accumulate without slipping back.
That's the metaphor. Each generation adds or refines something, building on past knowledge. The pigeon homing experiment is the absolute classic demonstration of this.
Right, tell us about that.
Researchers set up pigeon flocks where individuals were gradually replaced over time, simulating generations. They tracked the efficiency of the flock's homing routes.
And what did they find?
They found that the flock's routes got progressively better, shorter, more direct over these simulated generations. Crucially, the routes eventually became more efficient than any single control pigeon flying alone repeatedly could achieve.
Wow. So the group, through turnover and interaction, figured out better routes than even the best individual could find on its own.
That's exactly it. The interpretation is that the group interactions, maybe exploring different options, sharing information, averaging paths, allowed the flock to collectively discover and then learn superior routes. The group was literally smarter than its smartest member over time.
That's incredible. And this isn't just a cool biological party trick, right? This collective learning, this culture, has real evolutionary significance.
Huge significance. Think about it. If different populations of the same species develop distinct migratory routes or traditions through social learning.
They might end up breeding separately.
Exactly. These cultural differences can contribute to reproductive isolation, effectively putting populations on different evolutionary paths. It can be a driver of diversification, maybe even speciation.
So culture can shape evolution.
Yeah.
But there's a downside too, isn't there? Something about relying on the group.
Yes. The flip side is the potential for an alley effect, specifically related to collective navigation.
Alley effect.
Yeah.
That's when smaller populations do worse, right?
Yeah. Right. Usually we think about small populations suffering from inbreeding or trouble finding mates. But here, if a species relies heavily on collective navigation, needing that group averaging or emergent sensing, then if the population size drops too low,
They lose the benefit of the group intelligence.
precisely, their navigation might become less accurate, less efficient. This can create a dangerous feedback loop. Lower population leads to worse navigation, which leads to lower survival or breeding success, which lowers the population further. It can make species vulnerable to sudden collapse once they dip below a certain density.
Wow, so the very thing that makes them successful can become an Achilles heel if their numbers dwindle.
It's a potential risk for highly social, collectively navigating species.
Okay, so wrapping this all up.
Yeah.
We started with instinct as this simple, fixed genetic blueprint.
And we've ended up somewhere vastly more complex and dynamic.
Yeah, it involves physics at the quantum level for navigation.
Flexible, modifiable patterns shaped by experience.
And these incredible layers of social interaction, collective intelligence, and even culture building up over generations.
Absolutely. Instinct isn't just a command from the genes. It's this ongoing dialogue between inheritance, the environment, individual experience, and crucially, the social context. The line between innate and learned, it's practically vanished in many cases.
So the big takeaway for you listening, what should you be thinking about?
Well, I think it's realizing that these fundamental survival tools, honed over millennia, rely on principles that honestly look a lot like things we grapple with. Think swarm robotics, collective problem solving in human groups.
Nature figured out distributed networks and collective intelligence long before we did.
Pretty much. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What about groups we haven't studied as much? Migratory insects, huge swarms of butterflies or locusts. How do they make collective decisions about timing, altitude, direction? Are they using similar principles?
How much of what seems like chaos is actually emergent order?
Exactly. And maybe turn it inwards too. How many solutions or innovations in our own lives, our workplaces, our societies aren't really planned by a single leader, but emerge from the interactions of the group?
And that final question.
Yeah. What unique perspective or piece of knowledge are you holding, perhaps without even realizing it, that your flock, your family, your team, your community might be implicitly relying on as part of its collective wisdom?
Something to definitely chew on. That concludes this deep dive into the animal kingdom's genetic GPS and collective mind. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.